It has been a wild week for everyone in Lincoln, Nebraska, starting with a big Husker win over Iowa, and now here we are talking about Mickey Joseph. To break it all down, to recap the feeling in Husker Nation, we are pleased to bring in a guest. John Johnston from Core Nation joins us now. John, it has been a wild week in Lincoln, Nebraska. Now, you guys have kind of been through a lot, these past 3 or 4 or frost years that you guys have had to endure here. Has this been the wildest week that you've endured, since maybe our good old buddy Scotty was the head coach here just a little bit ago?
Yeah, I'd say yes. I mean, I recently I was talking to some guys today, and they asked me, well, what do you think about the last few years? And my answer was, I am flushing them from my brain as we speak. I literally am taking the Scott Frost era, that guy that we fired. I don't even want to say his name anymore. And I literally just dismissing the memories of all of it. But yeah, this last week, I mean, we beat Iowa for the first time in 84 years. And that was fun, of course, to get that monkey off our back. And it was a fun game. It was tense at the end, but the good guys came out on top. And then, we have Matt Rhule comes, stuff starts happening Saturday morning. It kind of gets official before game day. He goes on game day. We get some publicity, and everything looks great. He does the press conference on Monday. Looks like the son of a minister, great speaker, says things everybody loves, looks great. And then you have the Mickey Joseph thing happen. And it's literally like good. Oh, you can't have nice things. And there you go. I mean, you can't really, there's not really any way of sugarcoating what happened with Mickey Joseph. So
from a conference point of view, doing the stuff that I do, it seems to be kind of from an outsider's view. It seems to be this week almost seems like a microcosm of the past 4 or 5 years that Nebraska fans have had to endure. So sometimes when you ask somebody, do you want the good news first or do you want the bad news first? They say, well, give me the bad news first. So we're going to get this out of the way very quickly. Obviously, a very unfortunate, a sad situation with Mickey Joseph and all that has gone on. There was such a waiting period to see, is Mickey going to get hired on as a permanent member of Matt Rhule's coaching staff? What was and we're seeing more details kind of emerge with this Mickey Joseph situation. What was kind of your first reaction when you heard what had happened, and we'll talk about the future of Nebraska football without Mickey Joseph, but what was kind of your first reaction?
Yeah, honestly, that was my first reaction is why can't we have nice things? I mean, it was kind of oh God, why did this happen? Or what happened to cause this? Or, what is this about? Is this really happened? Did Mickey Joseph do this? And because there's so much stuff, when you go on Twitter and you hear from guys, Mickey Joseph's been arrested. And then you're kind of like, okay, is this going to get confirmed? Or is this people yanking my chain? Because people do that all the time. And, it's really unfortunate. I mean, the guy looked like he was due for a fairly large payday. His career was going to get a big boost. And then this happens. And you really, at the age of, I think he's 59. I mean, I'm 60. You're kind of at the point where you're kind of like, okay, if I was 30, maybe I'd recover from this. But yeah. I don't, at the age of 59, I think you just kind of go, okay, I think I'll go coach football. And we'll, or potentially, I guess their felony assault charges, go to jail, I guess. There was more stuff coming out today, and I did not have time to read any of it because it was kind of a busy day with other things. But, shocking and disappointment, I guess, are the words you use.
Yep. So I think the big thing that when you talk about, okay, this happened, now what's the cause and effect? You see Dakotas Crawford enter the transfer portal. You see Malachi Coleman decommit and reopen his recruiting. So all of those guys, those are just 2 guys. There's more guys that were very affected by Mickey Joseph in recruiting. There's no doubt about it. He's one of the best recruiters in the country. How do you think this is going to affect because this is the on the field product that Mickey was able to do in a really nice way to bring these guys in? How do you see now with a Mickey Joseph list recruiting room, so to speak, how do you see this affecting Nebraska football in the near future? Because we know this transfer portal business is going to get crazy real quick.
Ernest Hausman was another guy that transferred apparently too. and he was a shining star that was a freshman. You kind of looked at him as this guy could be really good in the next few years. We at Corn Nation, I have a whole bunch of people that write for me, and one of them pointed out, are we better off or worse off than Baylor was when Matt Rhule took that over? And the key with Baylor is they only had 45 scholarship players. And I thought about that for a minute, and I thought, maybe in a way Baylor was better off because they didn't have to lose people.
Yeah.
And they knew they were in dire straits, and they didn't have expectations, and they didn't, people now are going, oh, Malachi Coleman's gone, and oh, Ernest Hausman's gone, and the Coldest Crawford, and there's this constant, you mentioned the last 4 years, there's constant doom and gloom around us. And the reality is Mickey Joseph is a good recruiter. I mean, Justice Jefferson, Jamar Chase, good receivers coach. But there's other coaches. I mean, the reality is I think people were starting to talk themselves into this, that next year, oh, we can get to a bowl game, or, oh, we're going to be fine. And when reality is, we're not. I think this was going to be a huge undertaking anyway, because our offensive and defensive lines they're terrible. They really are. I mean, our defensive line, probably not so much, not a lot of depth there, which we really need. But somebody's going to have to build those things before Nebraska really becomes a good football team. And so I don't think that the overall, does this hurt a lot? And if you take an objective look and step back, I don't think it does. I think it hurts people because they were really, let's face it, Mickey Joseph was a guy who stepped into a hellscape and took it over and turned a football team that was completely annihilated because of what Scott Frost was doing, and built and had kept them together and kept them throughout a season. And in the end of the season, beat our biggest rival for the first time in 8 years, honestly. That's an amazing job. And I think people really, when you look at it, they were disappointed that, yes, he's going to be gone now, no matter what. Is players going to go with him? Probably. But I think a lot of those players were going to go anyway. And one of the things that I really made a point with on my videos and what I talked about a lot is stop worrying about things before they happen. We still don't know who he's going to hire for defensive coordinator, Matt Rhule, and we still don't know his full coaches. So, Ernest Hausman entering the portal might be seeing what's available for him in nil if somebody else wants to buy him, because that's how it works these days.
Yeah.
He might come back. So, we'll worry about it when all of when the transfer portal closes, because there's 2 periods for it, and it will close, and then you'll know who you have on your team. So that was a long answer to your question, wasn't it?
That's okay. I love the insight. You kind of segued into my next point, is Matt Rhule. Now, does this, because we're thinking, oh, maybe Mickey Joseph's coming in, he's going to be able to retain some guys, he's going to be able to go out and get some other guys, to kind of get a good hybrid of a roster. Now without Mickey, and now you see a lot of these players that were Mickey Joseph kind of guys decommitting, transfer portal, that kind of thing. Does this make the job that much tougher for Matt Rhule, do you think, entering year 1 in 2023?
I want to say no, but that'd be biased. I think the key here is this. People point to, you can externally, when you look at a program, you see things like recruiting. What you don't look at is who understands the players. I mean, most of Nebraska's coaches are already gone. Like Bill Bush, people thought he might be retained. He did an excellent job as the step-in defensive coordinator. He's not going to be back. People were looking to Mickey Joseph. They, like you mentioned, a recruiter. Somebody needs to be around on the staff that has worked with these, I don't want to call them kids, young men, understands their personalities, understands how they're motivated. And if he's not there, you normally would want to retain one guy on staff that would help you through the transition process. And it cannot be, I can't remember his first name. There's too many Raiolas.
Donovan, I believe.
It can't be the guy that was our offensive line coach, because he was terrible. I mean, our offensive line did not learn how to recognize fronts. They couldn't block people when they had twists and stunts in front of them. They regressed. So that guy cannot stay. He just, if he stays, then I don't know. I'm burning all my Nebraska gear or something. It would be not good. Unless he maybe stays as an analyst, which I don't
Yeah.
think he will. I mean, he was in the NFL. He'll go back to that. But I think that's the key with Mickey Joseph is if he's not there, who's going to help this transition? And that will make the next year harder, I think, than actually the recruiting side of it, because other guys will be able to recruit. And like I mentioned, Nebraska is going to have a large nil war chest.
Yes.
So when we say recruiting, a lot of times we're just saying, who's going to buy these players?
Who's going to throw the bag at them? Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I
So
think that's going to be easier for Nebraska going forward.
they've done really well in terms of NIL collectives to try to really bolster that program. So speaking of, we're going to go from bad news to good news. We're going to rewind in the week, so to speak. We're going to talk about Matt Rhule now. Okay, what was your first reaction? This had been rumored, and then it kind of died down, and then it ramped back up, kind of over the weekend. What was your initial reaction? Because again, like I said, this was kind of in the works, it seemed, for a couple of weeks. So it was to be expected maybe that these two were talking and that this was going to happen. But what was your first reaction when Matt Rhule was confirmed to be the head coach?
I think it was happiness, but I can't tell a lot of times because I've been dead inside from the previous coaches era. He was one of the guys that I'd say was in my top 3 or 4. I probably had Dave Aranda at the top. Luke Fickell would have been one of them that's up there. But I didn't think he'd ever leave Ohio, so shocking me. I thought Matt Rhule was a good choice. I was happy that he was coming to Nebraska. I guess I looked at his, I did a bunch of videos about different coaches, and Matt Rhule was one of the ones. I made jokes about him looking like an Ewok, but other than that, I think he's a rounded guy. He's done a lot of different stuff. He's been to the NFL and obviously didn't do well there. So maybe it's just out of his system now and he doesn't have to do that ever again. And bottom line, I'm happy he's coming to coach Nebraska and I'm ready to, the sad part is the season's months away.
Just got to do a whole nother waiting game like it was after the retooled transfers and retooled coaching staff last season. So in that introductory press conference, I could feel the Nebraska fans just salivating over what he had to say, talking about the line of scrimmage, talking about the physicality, talking about the toughness. When we look at that press conference, you said that guy's a hell of a speaker, right? I think a son of a pastor.
Yeah.
What impressed you about what he had to say about that? And was it the physicality, offensive line, that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, there was that one line about you have to win in the trenches or win with the line. I couldn't hear the rest of it because I was weeping after that. I think he also said something about the team with the best quarterback usually wins. And I thought, that is true. We really kind of overlook that, but it's kind of true in today's football. The game has become much more quarterback oriented than it probably ever has. Overall, the honest truth is, I guess I'm going to bring up that guy we fired. He stood up there. He wore a tie, buttoned it all the way up. He didn't look like a pig. And, I hate to be that blunt, but the last guy we had went to the Big Ten media days. He couldn't button his tie, couldn't shave. He had a dip in. This guy looked like he actually wanted to be a professional and do a job where he's getting paid millions of dollars a year. And I guess that's really bluntly the impression I took from him is, he went, we do a unity walk thing where it's outside the stadium. Yep. He stood there and he talked for a little bit. And I thought this guy, Trev Alberts, when he fired that other guy, he said, this guy, I'm not worried about winning the press conference. Well, he won the press conference dimes. 10,000, and it was just impressive, everything he said. I've also seen some other interviews, and one of the things I found was I want to say the word shocking, but I guess it shouldn't be shocking. He said that his wife, I'm going to get this wrong. It's not dementia. Sorry, that's what I have sometimes. I think she's involved in like charities and stuff for dyslexia or learning issues. And going to go do that. And he said, I'm going to go out about town. And all of us as Nebraskans are going to be like, what? You can't do this. We're insane people, And I think those things you look at it and none of our coaches, previous coach certainly never gave a damn about any of that. So for him to even say that is that's shocking. If it happens, I'll be even more surprised. I don't doubt him, but we are hard on football coaches. We're hard on everybody. You know, we're hard on each other as fans.
And the ironic part of that is Scott Frost was a Nebraska guy, of course, for all those years being born and raised in that state as well. You mentioned Luke Fickell before. There's been some talk, was Luke Fickell contacted by Trev Alberts first? Who contacted? Was it Wisconsin? Was it Nebraska? There's been all kinds of talk about that. It seems like I think both of these coaches are really good hires, but it seems like the more we kind of go down this list, these two are always going to be joined at the hip and they're always going to be compared. Once again, rumors, okay? If Luke Fickell was available, would you have maybe considered him a little bit more over Matt Rhule, or how do you think those two are going to compare as we kind of go down 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road?
I think if you would have asked me, I would have said I'd take Luke Fickell over Matt Rhule. And that's probably because, of what do they call it? Recency bias.
Yeah.
I mean, Matt Rhule was just fired from the Carolina Panthers. And it was terrible. And the Carolina Panthers are terrible. Whereas, Luke Fickell was just on the, last year he was just the G5 school in the playoffs. So they have that recency bias thing. But I think it'll be, here's the thing. You look at Nebraska, I think we're going to do every possible thing we can do to have Matt Rhule be successful. That includes a large nil packages, nil collective stuff going on. We certainly have facilities. He's going to get a generous pool of money for assistant coaches. And then I look over at Wisconsin and I think, Brett Bellamy left there because he didn't get money for assistants. Paul Christ didn't know what a recruiting coordinator was, apparently. Gary Anderson was there, and he was like, the hell with this place. I'm out of here. And, I looked at a Wisconsin guy I had lunch with today, and I said, okay, who do you think is going to be more medley guy, our grandpa or your grandpa? Because I think it's going to be your grandpa, and that guy causes problems for your program. So I think that's the big question for me for Wisconsin is Grandpa Barry going to, trickle down and say, no, you can't do this. No, this is the Wisconsin way. I think that'll be interesting to see what happens at Wisconsin.
I think that's, I tweeted it, outside of that Gary Anderson experiment. All of the coaches since Barry, who was hired, I believe, in 1990, have been within the Barry Alvarez family. Of course, Paul Christ played at Wisconsin. There was the offensive coordinator under Burt, and obviously Burt was the defensive coordinator that got promoted. And then we know about Jim Leonard on the interim status. That's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. I'm going to leave you on this as long as we're talking about Wisconsin. NCAA volleyball tournament coming up. Nebraska and Wisconsin have faced off twice this year. I believe the Huskers have only won one set, and they've been very competitive games. Should they meet again in the NCAA tournament, championship, Final Four, that kind of thing, what does Nebraska have to do to knock off the mighty Badgers, 4-time defending Big Ten volleyball champs?
Ouch. That last part hurt. You did preface this with if they meet again, because I was going to say first they have to get there. I mean, we're missing Kenzie Knuckles, who was one of our setters, very influential, very good player, very much beloved by us, who blew her knee out in a practice right before they played Wisconsin again this weekend. What they have to do is shut down Sarah Franklin. I mean, they have to pass better and they have to serve better. I don't know if they can beat Wisconsin because Nicklin Hames, who was up on my wall, she's banged up and she's also an excellent setter and passer. Kenzie Knuckles is out. Tonight, Whitney Lowenstein isn't playing because she's been ill. So Nebraska has had such good volleyball, and to come into the end of the season like this and, have players injured, not able to play and be at the best of you have to be. I mean, volleyball is really, as a sport, has grown, and it's amazing because it's fast and it's exciting, and the women are athletic. I've shot volleyball as a photographer, and it's just when you're that close to it, it's just unbelievable how athletic they are. But for Nebraska to beat Wisconsin, it's going to have to be the passing, the serving particularly, and then taking Sarah Franklin. I think she's like 18 feet tall, out of the game for Wisconsin. I don't really see. I think I did a volleyball bracket, believe it or not, today, and I did not have Nebraska beating Wisconsin. And if you ask me who I pick, I'll weep to win it all. Go ahead, ask me.
Who'd you pick?
I picked Texas.
Oh, no.
And I feel icky all over. But I looked at the end and I thought,
oh, no.
I know Texas. I mean, my volleyball writers, she didn't just play Division I. She also coached Division I for, Army at West Point. And she tells us a lot about volleyball. And Texas has a lot of depth, and they also have, Kayla Caffey, one of our former players that I loved watching. And I don't want Texas to win. I don't want Wisconsin to win this either. Louisville can win it, and that would be okay because Danny Busboom is a former Nebraska player. Loved her watching. There's not many volleyball girls I've ever hated that played for Nebraska. Penn State, maybe, but Minnesota, no. Wisconsin, yes, but not Nebraska.
We appreciate the time, John. Things will get better. There is hope in Husker Nation. Okay. And everything's, I think, going to be okay. Once again, thank you for joining us. Check John out, cornation.com as well. Check out the website and the YouTube channel. John, thanks again for joining me.
Sure. Thanks for having me.